why it's happening, unfortunately, is because parents many times are marrying daughters because they're poor and they think this is a solution to poverty. Sometimes they can't feed another mouth in the family. At other times, they just don't know. They don't know how bad it is. They don't relate the consequences of child marriage to child marriage. Nobody has thought it through. At other times, we see places where parents would like to change. They have more aspirations for their daughters, but they're afraid. They're afraid that people will say bad things about her. They're afraid she might get sexually molested if she stays at home and is unmarried. They're afraid she won't get married if they break the social roles. So there are many reasons why it's happening, but it is also changing, and that's the key.
Now, in the film, at the beginning it said we're talking about 10 million girls every year. I mean, these girls are completely invisible, it seems. Nobody's talking about them. I mean, 27,000 girls every day, that's an enormous amount. As Mary Robinson says, this is a human rights abuse, but it's also a development issue. And so what are these consequences? And
Sure, it is sad that it is invisible because in some ways, you know, people thought of it not as a development problem. Marriage is a traditional, a family, a cultural issue, but it's very much a demographic issue, it's very much a health issue, it's very much an economics issue, it's very much an education issue. It's tied to all of those things. And the simple fact is, you know, several centuries ago, even a century ago, even in Europe, girls were married at fairly young ages to a lot older men, and that was not uncommon. People wanted girls to have kids fairly early. Everybody died fairly fast. 35 or 40 was the life expectancy. And today, that's not the case. Even in most developing countries, life expectancy is in the 60s or the 70s. So that has changed, but what hasn't changed is understanding that this practice has to go by the wayside. Now, some countries, you know, it really has happened. Taiwan, China, Indonesia, there were countries where a vast majority of girls used to marry as children, but now they don't. In other countries, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Senegal, Mali, Niger, this is still happening. And there is a great correlation. If you think about, there isn't a single country that is doing well economically and socially and health-wise that has child marriage. There is not a single country that is like that. And the correlation between having child marriage and having really bad development outcomes on health, on maternal mortality, on education, on poverty, on the generational transmission of poverty. That is, if you have girls who are getting married at 14 or 15, they're not getting any human capital, they're not going to school, they're not prepared for the labor market, they're having kids at a very young age, they're likely to either die or get very sick during childbirth, their kids are likely to die or stay sick and be malnourished, and those kids then don't have a chance in life, and then that's your next generation of poverty. So the consequences are enormous because they multiply. So you're creating generation after generation that isn't equipped for the modern world.